This is a Two Front podcast. 60% of doctors have invested a dime before they're 60 years old.
If I'm in my 60s and I want to retire and it's a solo practice and I've been working 35 years, you know what?
Smart people start with the end in mind.
We're thinking about succession planning just like any business. And that's why I believe in this whole concept of a team approach.
Today, we have Dr. Jonathan Levine. He's truly a business guru. He runs an extremely successful, beautiful practice. He's started and sold a whitening company called Glow Whitening, has so many ventures.
Think like an entrepreneur, because we're all entrepreneurs. You have to be a creative thinker. You have to have a good banker, you have to have a good accountant, and you have to have a good lawyer. You have to surround yourself with experts, and you cannot have anybody weak. We really want to take people and bring them up to the highest level possible. Life is a team sport. Be a servant leader to make everybody the best versions of themselves.
You need to have an exit strategy, right? That's like really step zero.
You got a crooked smile, well that don't bother me much. You double over, working double time, you double tough. I'll just shine it up until the sun hit like a glare. I gotta dare, get the fuck up out the chair.
Welcome back to The Happy Dentist. Today, we have Dr. Jonathan Levine, who we've had on our show before, and he was so amazing and brought so much value, and we had so many views and downloads, so we decided to bring him again. So, Jonathan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Ingrid. I'm so happy to be here.
So we were just saying before the show that something that dentists don't really talk about that we would love to pick your brain on, because for those of you who don't know Dr. Jonathan Levine, he's truly a business guru. He runs an extremely successful, beautiful practice in Manhattan. He just opened up his second practice. He's started and sold a whitening company called Glow Whitening, has so many ventures. And something that we want to pick your brain on is how to start a practice with the end in mind, so that by the time you have an exit, you have a successful exit. This is something that's really near and dear to my heart because my dad's in the middle of trying to sell his practice right now, given it's a neurology practice. But the multiples are just so depressing, like so painfully depressing. And I'm like, all of your hard work is ending in this. This is thousands of hours. So Jonathan,
I had the same experience, Ingrid, with my dad too. My dad recently
it's
retired right before
heartbreaking.
COVID. And it was the same thing. It was like, I think he had the practice for 35 years, started from scratch. And I was thinking gosh, that's all he's going to get at exit, it was crazy. But a lot of it was because he didn't think like what we're going to talk about today. Because no one thought about that back in the day.
No one talks about it. I mean, I recently read that less than 60% of doctors have invested a dime before they're 60 years old. So on that note, Jonathan, what does it mean to begin with the end in mind to you?
Yeah. Well, that's a line from Steve Covey Sr. And the end in mind is an interesting idea where you're putting out there, where do I want to be, let's say, when I want to be doing something different. I personally don't like the word retire. Retired to me means, we're going to be stopping ourselves. I think it's the beginning of a new chapter. So you get to a point where you say, I want to be doing some new things. But I think what we're really saying is, for us professionals, physicians, dentists, doctors, orthopedic surgeons, plastic surgeons, when we have our private office and we have our business in this private office, we have to think like a business person. Think like an entrepreneur, because we're all entrepreneurs. You have to be creative thinkers. So what do I mean by
Jonathan,
that?
wait, if I'm thinking about business, that means that I'm not going to be doing good work, I thought.
Yeah.
That means that I'm just going to be like a hack and all I care
Exactly.
about is money and I'm going to be unethical, right?
Exactly. Well, Kyle, I really wish you started in dentistry when I did, because you'd be even more sarcastic with that sentence. Because here I was probably the first dentist as a specialist to do PR with my friend Nancy Berman. And I had these calls from my prosthodontic colleague. What are you doing? You're mining the profession. How could you have something in vogue about your practice? And exactly. So what I used to do is really get charged up by that, because my mindset is, if somebody's calling me and telling me, what are you doing? And that's wrong. And you can't do that. And you're doing things outside the traditional boundaries. I just get more charged up. I just get happier. You know what? I'm onto something. So I'm with you, Kyle, on that. And what I would say is that as professionals, numero uno is the care of our patients. we spend years studying our craft to be amazing at what we're doing. Whether we're surgeons, whether we're implant surgeons, whether we're a prosthodontist, restorative dentist, it's all about how do we bring the highest level of care for our patients. So that's fundamental. But right next to it is that we have to run a business. And if you're running a business, you are thinking creatively and you're building these other capabilities. So then you sit back and say, well, how do I build these capabilities? And the way you build these capabilities is understanding your priorities of building this business. So, great business coach, diving deep in the whole concept of what do you need to know to run a business? Because we talked about it on our last podcast of that the creative has to have the integrator that helps you kind of make sure your trains are running on time, right? You're building all your verticals of your organization. You have to be training focused, HR focused. You have to be able to communicate well with the patient. So that means you have to build a team. And so assuming that in a fairly early stage, you know that you're building a team. And we talk about it, right? Life is a team sport, and so is everything we do in life. So in healthcare and in dentistry, you're building a team. Okay. So we're not doing things alone. And we're bringing people along with us, and you're exciting people. And the only way you can excite people, if you're working backwards from that concept, is to be a servant leader to make everybody the best versions of themselves. Many of these things can take decades to learn. So the key, I think, and Christian, I'm going to go to you right now, but the key is to really understand this as early as possible in your career so you can develop these
But
capabilities.
but these are all capabilities to run a business that is
Yes.
different than planning an exit strategy.
Yes, I'm
I
getting
think that
there.
I think that as dentists, we all been talking for more than a decade about the importance of knowing how to run the business, right? But I remember the first time I heard the sentence exit strategy. When I was starting DSD, I had no clue. I never heard about it. And somebody came to me, super smart business person, and said, Christian, you're just starting this. Fantastic. What is your exit strategy? And I'm like, what? I'm enjoying here. I want to start a business. You're talking about the exit. And that's the first time I learned, smart people start with the end in mind. You need to start, and you tell me, how do you want to end this? I don't want to end this. I want to be here forever. I want to work here forever. I'm so excited. And the person was like, don't be naive. You're gonna want to exit. And even if you don't exit, the exercise of preparing to exit will make your business better.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
The homework, and it's totally different than making money. Making money as you go, succeeding as you go with the business, getting your brand out there, making people want to be with you, use you, etc. It's a completely different thing than actually learning how to prepare for an exit. And the only way to start, the first step, is to admit that, is to embrace that, is to start looking for the answers of what means doing the homework to get the best possible exit on whatever you do. And that's something that I'm still collecting information, because I think that it's very important to talk to dentists and to help them to do this homework.
So maybe that's step 0 then, Christian. Step 0 is just the self-awareness that there will be an exit. You need to have an exit strategy, right? That's like really step 0. It's the self-awareness.
Because
And
most people, like, probably, I would say 98% of people probably don't have that, right? Like,
They don't they
like
don't
you're
think like
saying,
that.
Christian, like, why would we think about that? This is our life, but it's a reality. It's a reality that it's gonna happen. So, Jonathan, I kinda wanna ask you a super direct question, which is, what do you think about are the components that make a successful exit for a dental practice?
Yeah. So I think Christian made a great point, and I was warming up to what he's saying because the truth is there's a mindset here. You're setting your mind and you're saying to yourself, "Okay, don't be naive. What does that end in mind look like?" because it's all about reverse engineering. It's all about working backwards from that point. Now, we don't know what we don't know. It's like starting a business and people says, "Oh, you got to have a robust business plan." But the truth of the matter is, anybody who starts business knows a lot about minimal viable product and just starting and testing and build, test, learn loops and all those concepts. The same thing for us. Where I was going is you think like an entrepreneur. What does that mean? You're thinking like a business person. So yes, end in mind. What are those things that the dentist should be thinking about? So I could say this, that you learn that you have to build a team. You learn that you have to build a system to what you're doing. You say to yourself, you know what? I might want to build 2, 3, 4 of these practices, even if you really don't, but you want to build your practice in that way. We call it scalability. Because when you're thinking about scaling, you're thinking about a big focus on something critically important, which are standards. How should my assistant and my assistants work from a standpoint of a standard operating procedures? Not that it's locked into it, but these are the standards of the practice. Hygienists, these are the standards, SOPs. And these are the operational protocols. How do I answer the phone? How can I engage with the patient? I want to create unique, incredible hospitality for my patient. I want to change the rules. And we can go on and on about the challenges and the pain points of healthcare and what are the things we want to change. But all of those things to get your people, the right people on the bus, right? That Jim Collins talks about, and the right people in the right seats on the bus that Jim Collins talks about, which really means you got to get the wrong people off the bus. So you're getting the right people on the
But
bus.
I would add a comment on the right people, because one thing, having the right people, we know it's mandatory, it's the best. While you're still there, you're planning on exiting. The question becomes, how can you have the right people and right people that want to be there regardless if you're going to be there?
Exactly.
Because that counts to the investor when they see key people in the organization. They're very solid, very good, and they're not like, if this main person leaves, I'm going to leave as well.
So stay right there. That's why I started with culture. That's why I started with the team sport. Because if I'm in my 60s and I want to retire and it's a solo practice and I've been working 35 years, you know what? Your multiple's not going to be so great, because when you retire, what are we going to do? And you got to have an organization that's kind of understands that I'm going to plug somebody in. I'm going to get them introduced. It's a much different thing that in my 60s, I got 3 38-year-olds or 2 38-year-olds that are ready to take on that practice. And that's why I believe, in this whole concept of a team approach. Because right behind me, I have a great young dentist who is studying under me, who's learning the culture of the business, who's learning their skills and their capabilities there. So we're thinking about succession planning, just like any business. We're thinking about operating leverage, which is a whole team. If my operational person leaves, I have somebody who's right next to that person. And look, it gets away from the one dentist, one assistant, one hygienist business model that has lived in dentistry for decades and decades. And now that's changing. And because of this organized approach that the dental service organizations, the DSOs, and the more advanced DSOs, right, where the quality of the care and the level of clinical training is paramount, right next to team building and a hospitality approach, right, in our dental practices. We're doing all the things right. We're building a team around this kind of platform of thinking of building a great business. Cannot just be us. So if I build an organization so that if I'm not here and I could play coach, I'm going to have maybe 3, 4 years are going to tell me, please stay on, or maybe 2 years, whatever the deal is going to be, that I have people who can step in and do exactly what I've done. I've spent the time to create that succession planning and a well-developed team. It takes time, but you focus on that. Then you have value.
I,
Look,
I have
what you got?
I have a list of things that I believe investors would value, and I think we can pick your brain on what you think about some of them here, because I think that this may be a good beginning of a recipe. At least if I was an investor, I would be valuing these things.
You know that sinking feeling when the same patient keeps coming back for crown after crown? Yeah, we've all been there. Here's the thing: what if we could actually prevent all that mess with a simple bite correction? That's where we come in at Two Front. We handle the whole Invisalign process for you. I'm talking zero ClinChecks, zero lab bills, barely any chair time. Oh, and we take on the liability too. Your patient gets a healthy bite that'll save them thousands down the road. You get to be the hero who prevented years of dental drama. It's honestly a no-brainer. Check out Two Front and start helping your patients dodge a lifetime of dental work today. Before we get into your list, Christian, I want to ask one thing, which is what is the range of multiples for selling a dental practice?
That's
Yeah.
a good question.
So I spent some time on this. So about 2 years ago, I said, you know what? I'm curious. What's my practice worth? And I was considering this whole scaling concept. My sons had their twice business. They were very involved with that, but they told me that they were very excited about opening up these dental practices because the dental service organizations and dentistry getting modernized became an extremely valuable industry. And that it is for some practices. And you know, we'll define that even more. But you can have a multiple of the EBITDA, of the profitability of that entity, anywhere from 4.5, about 4.5 on the low end, all the way up to 10 and 12. And it depends on all these things we're talking about. We're talking about multiple doctor practices on a good growth trajectory that's shown very good organic growth, that shows good protocols and systems, and of course, strong accounting to verify and validate your numbers, and and kind of that good team. And it could be multi-site, but it could even be one practice, but that has a number of clinicians and a strong team.
I wanted to find something for the audience first before we go on, which is EBITDA. Now, EBITDA has been talked about in dentistry for many years, but it's becoming much more popular now because that is how DSOs, DPOs are getting a value for a practice. So EBITDA is earnings before tax, or sorry, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization, EBITDA. And I don't think this really came into the dental market before maybe 10, 15 years at a normal scale. Before, everyone was talking about, like, if you had $1 million practice, you usually got 70 to 95% of that production, right? That was how most practices were bought. That was how I bought my practice.
Yeah.
I mean, if we just pick a random round number, let's say it was $1 million, a low end practice where it's more in network, it's less high end, it's, maybe not as nice, you pay 700,000 for it. But a higher end one that has a better reputation, that they're doing more cosmetic stuff, you may pay 900K for it. And so now what I like about the EBITDA model is that it's not just looking at production, because you can produce $1 million and make $100,000, or you can produce $1 million and make $500,000, right? And so it's really getting down to, I like what you said about accounting, because that's something that a lot of dentists don't think about, is accounting. Production, collections, overhead, how much you're paying your staff. That stuff is so important. And it goes back to what you said at the beginning, which is we have to think about this as a business. If you don't want to think about your practice as a business, go work for someone else.
Yeah,
Because
that's exactly right.
there's something dirty about we think there's something dirty about thinking about it like a business. But think about it like this. You can't take care of patients if you can't pay your rent.
Exactly.
You can't, pay your staff if you're not making enough money to bring it in. I mean,
But
you
I
can't
think
do good
people
work.
got over that. People got over that. Honestly,
I
people
still
got
think
over
people
that.
suffer with that, Christian.
I,
They
I do
still
too,
suffer with
Christian,
that.
100%. Like it's a dirty word in business. If you talk about money, it's a dirty word in dentistry. If you talk about money,
It's-
a lot of dentists, like, they put their hands up.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, also, just think about this.
I'm
We
not
know.
interacting with the same dentist.
I think
People that are coming.
maybe not.
Yeah,
DSD clients, maybe not.
but I want to make a point, because and Christian and I talked about this in our past. You got to love what you do. You don't love what you do, you got to get out. That's just the way it is. If you're stressed out, you got to do something else. to be cash constrained and not have good accounting and systems, you cannot provide a high level of care because you're stressed out. That's just the truth. So you have to have three things in a business. You have to have a good banker, you have to have a good accountant, and you have to have a good lawyer. You have to surround yourself with experts, and you cannot have anybody weak. We've all been there. We've had that. I've had a weak accountant. They had to make a switch. It's the same thing about your team. You really want to take people and bring them up to the highest level possible. You're creating, just talent around yourself. That allows us to do great things. So I want to get ready to sell my practice. I want to have experts around me who analyze where I'm at. Maybe I'm 15 years in. I'm thinking for the next 3 to 5 years, I want to grow it and then I want to sell it. Those next 3 to 5 years, I want to make all the right moves to get there.
I like what you said, Jonathan. You said a few things that made me think of other types of businesses. You were talking about standard operating protocols. You're talking about doing things a certain way, being intentional about how we talk. These are all things that great businesses do, like franchises, right? You think of a franchise, when you buy a franchise, you get a book, which is a standard operating procedure, how you answer the phone, how you hand the person the card or the product, how do you welcome them, what it's supposed to smell like, what the lights are supposed to look like, et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And no dentists are thinking
So
about
that's one of the points that I had here in my notes. Documented systems, meaning you start to do your homework in terms of everything that you do, from patient lead acquisition, conversion, front desk, waiting room, first appointment, second appointment, treatment, clinical appointments, how to hire, how to fire, how to connect and communicate with your lab. You start to document all these processes and you have this operational book. And when somebody comes to explore the option of buying you, you say, look, everything is here. I've been working on this. And if you buy my practice, you buy this with it. And everybody on this practice follows this from the day I hired them. I function based on this, and I can teach my associates or new associates to also function below this book. Now
You
imagine
know,
how much value that has.
it's so crazy that people don't know this. Like this is like this needs to be in the water of dentistry, right? Like it's people ask me that too, Christian, like, what's your exit strategy? And I was like, what? We are just getting started. But one thing that they taught me is exactly that. Like, if you wanna hire multiple at the end, which, people can take that as they want, is it greed or is it the ability to spread your mission and your value even bigger, right? And they said, "Write down everything. Write down absolutely everything." And dentists, we don't think about this because we don't think about it as a company. I wanna throw in a curveball to what you said, Jonathan, on the multiple. I know a celebrity practice in LA, will go unnamed, but this person has a really big brand, a really big Instagram brand, and he sold his practice for 40 times.
Hmm. God bless. God bless America. I think that's amazing. It's
So
amazing.
I think what you're saying is, like, for the person who's not building a brand, but I think it really shows, like, I believe every dentist in 2025 needs to be prioritizing their brands, and I think you'll have a higher out
That's
Comment
awesome.
on the
visit.
brand. Comment on the brand. Uh, don't use your name, right? Don't use your
Yes,
name because it
exactly.
goes with you, right? Create a brand that goes beyond you. Be okay with it. Put your ego aside. That's the beauty of the question. When they asked me 20 years ago, what's your exit strategy? I was like, DSD, it's all about me. And when they asked me that question, I realized if I make it not about me, oh my God,
Yeah.
now I get it, right? So for dentists, put yourself, you are the key person, yes, but create the strategy to not depend on you,
Yeah.
starting with the brands,
Yeah.
starting with the name.
Yeah. I would go this far. 10 years ago, I changed Johnson B. Levine and Associates, or 15 years ago, to JBL. And I'm
Mm.
JBL in New York City. Everybody knows me now in JBL for the last 10, 15 years. But I will say this. It's about creating those other people around you. I think of my friend Frederick Fakai. He's Fakai. It's his name. but he's not cutting hair anymore. And I can go on and on and on. Hairdressing is not so much different than aesthetic reconstructive dentistry, right? We're dealing with facial aesthetics. But Christian's point is so well taken. And building that brand, which means you have to take a team approach for that. Because just think about it, you're doing it yourself. I'm treatment planning, diagnosing, and working at the chair. I'm answering phones, or I have to coach my team. You got it. You know, how many hats that we all talk about that we could be wearing. So you're really building a team. And look, you're doing it over time. It doesn't take long. You know, you have a practice that's 5 years away from exit. In fairly short order, with the right experts and the right advice, and there's really great people to help dentists think like business people, they can ready their practice. It probably has a lot to do with their information systems. You know, what computer systems are they using? It has a lot to do with training. One of the hardest things in dentistry is to focus your people on training. Who's focusing people? We don't have an HR department. We don't have one person who's working just on training, just like all these companies that are really growing. So you really have to think about, how do I do that? Sometimes it comes from an outsourced relationship and an agency, and teaching somebody internally. But these are the things in our mind that we have to start developing as we build a plan to build a brand and get to that extreme multiple.
And on the brand topic, I would add one extra thing. It's much easier for you to attract and keep top people if the company's name is not your name. Imagine Kyle Stanley, young dentist, going to work somewhere, and the name of the practice is the name of the boss, Dr. Whatever. And then Kyle giving his business card to somebody that he cares about, and there's a name above his name. It's like Dr. Whatever, and then I'm below. So people, the great people don't want that, right? If they have potential to grow, they are okay working for a brand, working for a corporation, working for somebody bigger than the individuals. But you're going to miss the opportunity to attract great people if it's all about you. And I go back to DSD again at the beginning. I don't know if you remember, Kyle, the brand was DSD by Coachman.
Yeah,
right?
I remember.
And I started DSD by connecting with top big Eagles guys. And I realized, I said, if I keep my name here, nobody is going to show this logo in their lectures, in their speech. Nobody. I took my name out, and suddenly everybody was showing the image, the logo, the brand, the colors of DSD. So I think that that's an extra point on the branding, and how you, as the boss, you can empower people with simple things and actions that show that everybody can own this, right?
I'd like to ask everybody's opinion on this call, because I see this a lot on Facebook groups. And I want to be very specific about this. Do you think it is bad for our profession to sell your practice to a DSO?
Let's start with, who are the possible buyers? What are the options? And then let's go into DSO.
Exactly.
Who are
It
they?
I gotta tell you,
depends.
I have met so many CEOs of these different DSOs. Like anything else, there are levels. I
Mhm.
mean, I would emphatically say yes, but with a caveat, to the right one, to the
Exactly.
right diligence that you do, to spending the time to making sure that's going to be the place that I want my practice to have, that kind of corporate infrastructure, that team. You got to do that studying, and what level are they at? But look, the organized approach to dentistry is so necessary, because I lived
Mhm.
when it was completely disorganized. When I
Mhm.
started in dentistry, I just couldn't believe what a solo sport it is. It's changing, and it potentially, to your point and your question, it's potentially changing for the good. And you got to do your diligence, which means you got to be asking the right questions and get advisors. You know, there are these great M&A firms now in dentistry, um, large practice sales,
So
Jim
what are the
Fichter.
options?
They're well, when you think about it, okay, you have DSOs, and it's a fairly small community. It doesn't take long to talk to dentists that have sold their practice to a Heartland, to any of these acquisitional type DSOs, Independent, 42 North, on and on and on. Independence. There's so many of these that are at a very, very great level and really appreciates clinical excellence and operational excellence. So It's doing the diligence. It's meeting the team. You also have to have a great M&A team. I believe you have to have an M&A group representing you. They'll
Yes.
negotiate for you. They'll educate you. So I was saying LPS is one. Tusk is another one that I've met the people there that I had involved in looking at my practice because I really wanted to know this question. What you're asking is, how are they valuing practices? I have to go way back, but the first company I personally started was in 97, and I started a roll-up of dental practices. And we raised $10 million. We had 14 offices in New York City, all specialists. Really one of the first specialty DSOs in the country by far. And I learned a lot. I don't want to go into why it was such an abject failure, but I took the risk. I learned so much. And on the heels of that, I started a company called Go Smile that we sold in 2008, and then now the Glow Science Company. And you learn all along the way, and whether you're selling a product company, a service company, the same rules apply when it comes to exit. If you build a beautiful brand, and I have a beautiful skincare brand or an oral care brand, you want to know that they're going to take care of that company. A lot of times you still have equity in it. A lot of times, we call it the second bite of the apple. You can still have that equity. You want that team to really build your practice, and you want anybody who's going to make some decisions, not clinical decisions, but operational decisions for your practice, you want it to be aligned. So there's got to be an alignment of your mindset and how, what they're thinking about. And culture, again, goes right back into that conversation. So we can line these things up for diligence.
I still see a trend. I still see a trend. I don't know if you guys agree, of quality dropping right after the exit. Even if the main dentist stays, it looks like the motivation drops, right? And then even the good DSOs, they start to put pressure on the numbers. So you combine these two things, an extra pressure on the numbers, plus the main dentist already thinking on the next project. Almost everybody that sold a practice that I talked to, even though they're still working in the practice that used to be 100% theirs, almost 100% of them, when I talk about it, they're already talking about their next project. They're already talking about what they're going to do. So quality comes down with just your mindset, and your energy is not there 100%.
It's interesting what you're saying. I'm thinking of a company like Pacific Dental, and I'm close with Steve Thorne, who's the CEO. He's built that since 1978. His dad was a dentist, and he's done an amazing job at Pacific. And what he does is he builds de novo, not by acquisition. So he'll start these practices from scratch, right? He's got over 1,000 practices now, but he gives a career path to the young dentist where they can buy in. It's a reverse of the model. They're buying in, they get
Reverse
ownership
of the model. Yes.
to reverse that model, and you're making a good point. And, look, that's gonna evolve. I know Jeff Ligabella at 42 North, they do a fantastic job on clinical excellence. He's a fantastic CEO. I know they're very operationally focused. But, I would say that there's probably a tweaking that's gonna go on with the model where maybe the doctors get paid less upfront and they're incentivized, because you said the right word, Ingrid, that the docs are incentivized to maintain that level of excellence, maintaining that culture, and still have some skin in the game that is meaningful to them. I think you're all making real good points.
I see all the time on Facebook groups, people getting bullied because they're thinking about selling their practice to a DSO.
Oh,
And I honestly struggle with this question because my dad sold his practice not to a DSO, to an individual person, but he didn't make that much money. Like he
mhm.
could have made honestly 2-3x if he did sell it to a DSO. I wish he would have. But then there's also, there's that negative aspect of now it's a single owner and, they're doing good work and stuff. If it was a DSO, it may have turned into a mill. And I guess so the
Let
question,
let let me ask you. Let me ask the question in a different way. If we both, the four of us, if we needed desperately to do a full mouth rehabilitation on ourselves, would you go to Jonathan Levine's practice now? You prefer to go now while he's the owner, or in 10 years after he sells? Or would you go in Manhattan and find a practice that is a chain of practice or a DS or part of a DSO? Or would you prefer to go to a practice that the top dentist is at the peak of their game and owning 100% of the practice?
Christian, but those are two different questions. My question comes from, is it bad for our profession
That
to sell to a
I'm
DSO?
answering. I'm answering you. My answer is that
Your
if your
answer is
dad,
yes.
It was rhetorical question.
yeah,
The problem is that the system's broken. Like I don't think DSOs are set up for dentists and therefore patients to succeed. Like I think even though this Thorpe person and even though like MB2 is started by a dentist, the problem is corporate takes over to the point that doctors don't win. It's the level of greed becomes
it's
too
obvious.
greedy. It's
But
too
Ingrid,
greedy.
do you care if you're retiring? That's what I'm kind of saying is like, because Jonathan talked about this. Do you want to sell your practice to this or this? Do you care? If you're like, I'm done with dentistry, I'm never doing it again. Do you just take the bag of
But
money?
your question was, is it good for dentistry or not, right?
Yes, exactly. Is it good for the profession? And I think I fundamentally believe in the principles of capitalism that if we are doing what's best, the world succeeds. And I think that if we can create a DSO structure where doctors are properly incentivized, and let's say they have the infrastructure through this DSO to build their brand. Let's say they're like, all right, you're going to get 30% of your time back. Now we're going to build your brand. Now you're going to get more patients and you're going to be motivated to do care because you're financially incentivized. I think that's what we need.
Ingrid, this was the conversation you and I had 7 years ago. So instead of when I looked at DSOs and talked to these companies and there's the CEOs, the people, I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to go build my own DSO. I'm going to reinvent DSOs because they need reinventing. I think they're on a good path, but they're not there yet from an evolution standpoint because it's very Darwinian, right? And what I've done is I've done earn in for my doctors. They need to earn into equity so that the passion that I have for my profession, my hand-picked 2 or 3 new prosthodontists, my new orthodontist, my new periodontist. We have a structure, all specialists under one roof, and they have earning potential so that when I want to phase down, because I've been doing 8 days a month for 24 years. That's how I work because I've always built a team. Interesting concept, right? 2 days a week. But I coach the other days, or I'm doing other things that, add value or teach. I'm a professor at NYU. So,
Mhm.
all these things add. But at the end of the day, this DSOs, I think what we're saying is they need reinventing, and we're
Mhm.
still in the early days of the evolution of DSOs getting to that level that everything we're talking
One
about, maintaining the
100%.
excellence. 100%.
Extremely.
100%.
So, I mean, to answer your question succinctly right now, Kyle, I think the answer is no, but there's no better alternative right now. Right now, like, what are we supposed to do?
Here's a better way of asking the question. Should dentists sell for less to be a martyr for the profession?
Hell no. Never be a martyr.
That's the question.
We yeah,
That's the question because, listen,
yeah,
if
yeah,
you're
yeah.
70 years old,
We
do
can't
you give
ask
a shit
anybody
what
for that.
happens to dentistry? I mean, I'm not answering the question. I'm just saying, do people care? Like, should you take 2-3 times less, which could really improve your life, your kids, your grandkids? You could help charities, you could donate. Should you take less?
But is it helping the profession to get better? No. On the model that we have today,
Exactly.
no. And it needs to be reinvented.
It's like asking people not to eat meat for like, it's like you're 1 out of 8 billion people. We need a new system so that animals stop dying at the expense of people that are trying to eat meat. It's like, I
Exactly.
don't
But this is natural selection. So if we're selling our practices and we can't find the right group to sell to, we might say, you know what? I'm going to pass this time. I'm going to wait. DSOs are evolving. And at that high level of clinical excellence, operational excellence to meet, and it's alignment. You have to align your values, their values with your values.
There will be a day. There will be a day probably when clinics that are practices that are part of DSOs will be performing clinically better than
Yes.
individual practice. They're gonna find their way with the new generation of doctors where they're gonna create a path and a career path and motivation and skin in the game and all of this. But today, the reality is very, very clear. If a practice belongs to a DSO, it's automatically delivering less quality than the same practice before it was part of the DSO. That's my view.
I changed my answer. I almost see, Kyle, to your point, like my sister is one of these animal rights activists who, when she was at Columbia, she held up a screen of like animals dying with a scream face on in the subway, like trying to get people to stop eating meat. That's the same concept as someone saying, I'm not going to sell to a DSO. I actually think that these dentists should sell to a DSO, free up their minds, and we need to form a mastermind of how to build a better world of dentistry. Because when you're executing and doing dentistry, you don't have the mind share to actually build a new infrastructure. And dentists, we know what the world needs. And so I think that if we have more time to work on this as a collective unit, as a mastermind, we'll improve the profession. It's not private equity guys that are gonna improve our profession. It's us.
No.
But stay there. But you're 100% right, Ingrid. But stay there. It's always you got to follow the money. The private equity that's gone into dentistry, that's where the potential is for misalignment or not. Because you've got private equity people who will understand an industry and will understand the time that it takes to get organic growth in these acquired practices. How do we add value? Because that's when it works. We have a marketing team, we have an HR team, we can focus on training. So private equity is really the big issue because that's the money that's buying the practice, that's driving the culture and potentially the misalignment. And that's going to happen over time because when dentists say, no, I'm not selling the practice for X and to you because your value system is off and your exit strategy for me and your team isn't doing what they need to do, they are going to be forced, natural selection, to be better than they are.
100%. Thank you for coming, Jonathan. Where can people find you?
Yes. So at Dr. John Levine is my Instagram, Jon Levine, and of course on LinkedIn. And we have our website for the practice, jblnyc.com. And I have drjonathanlevine.com website.
Amazing. Thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure.
Great to be here.